this is how you're going to make your biggest contribution to the world. And so
Wow.
it was a difficult decision because, I had a very kind of sure thing, straight line path to success continuing doing
Sure.
real estate. I took a leap of faith, but it has worked out so far. And it's the most exciting thing I could do because real estate and blockchain were both my two biggest passions. And I found a way to merge the two of them. So it's very exciting and fulfilling work.
Dan Silverman, welcome to Digital Building.
Thanks for having me.
Really glad you're here. So tell us about Balcony.
Balcony helps governments modernize their land and property record management systems using new technology like blockchain and AI. And, at Balcony, we consider land records as critical infrastructure. We don't think that they're really treated that way. And what I mean by that is a lot of times they live in disparate or opaque systems that don't speak to each other. They are heavily paper-based, or they live on-prem in one computer with one point of failure that's subject to natural disasters like fires or floods or ransomware attacks that are increasing by 100% year over year. It's becoming a major national security threat, actually, because of how advanced hackers and criminals are becoming. And right now, they just ask for ransom, cost taxpayers millions of dollars, which is obviously horrible. But we fear one day it might be a foreign enemy adversary that just wants to create chaos and blank out these systems so we don't know who owns what liens are on what properties, and creating, tons of title disputes. So we look to beef up and harden those rails and those systems that house and authenticate these records, which blockchain does a very good job at. Another thing, speaking of national security threats, we know that foreign adversaries have been strategically purchasing land near critical infrastructure in the United States, such as military bases, nuclear silos, et cetera. And there's not a good way for state and federal agencies to kind of monitor those. So that's also a focus of ours, just kind of understanding who owns what, who's buying what and where, and potentially flagging those transactions. As a byproduct of what we're doing, we're also helping to mitigate things like deed and mortgage fraud, which are also on the rise. We think largely because of AI and the fact that it's never been easier to spin up fraudulent documents that are completely indistinguishable from reality. So when someone commits deed fraud, they're really trying to tell a full story. They're not just creating a fake deed. They're creating fake payoff letters, fake probate records, fake heirship records, fake emails, all this stuff to kind of tell a convincing story that they're the new owner. So you need to kind of keep up with technology and fight fire with fire using blockchain and AI to solve those types of things. And then lastly, really just trying to make home buying more affordable by creating efficiencies within the title research process and within the settlement table so that it becomes easier, quicker, and cheaper to purchase homes.
Wow, those are a lot of amazing things that are so desperately needed. I know that there has been some news stories about this deed fraud. Can you tell us maybe a couple of those news stories that you've seen recently?
Sure. So there was one pretty recently that happened in New York that got a lot of headlines that ended up prompting the administration in New York to say they're going to spin up a deed fraud task force. And I don't know all the particulars there. I know that there were some high profile people that were involved in that fraud and that it involved them doing, essentially what I just said, spinning up a lot of fraudulent documents, fake birth certificates, fake identity. I didn't see anything that pointed to AI, but I'm assuming that these tools, they're using these tools that they have available to tell a convincing story. Identity theft is one of the biggest causes and leading causes of deed fraud, and with deepfake technology, people are able to find new ways to get around it and convince title agencies that they're in fact the actual owner, or that the owner passed away and heired the property to themselves. So that's a high profile case that just happened recently, and hopefully New York follows through and does create a deed fraud task force, because right now there's not a great way to kind of escalate these cases. The role of the county clerk is purely ministerial, which means that when they're recording a deed, they're only looking for formatting issues. They're looking for a missed signature, a name being spelled incorrectly. Even if they suspect that it might be a potential case of fraud, there's actually little they could do to stop the reporting from happening, because they're not investigators. It's not part of their job or their scope, nor should it be, in my opinion, to actually weed out deed fraud. Really what they need are the tools to kind of flag and identify it, and then the ability to escalate it to an agency that is tasked or in charge of investigating and escalating and putting a stop to these type of things. And the earlier that we're able to detect those things, the better, because most often now, deed fraud isn't caught until after the deed gets recorded, and in most cases after the fraudster monetizes the asset, meaning that they've gone to a bank with the fraud, or some kind of lender, and taken out a mortgage against it, and then it becomes messy and complicated, and you have to go through the court process in order to quiet title and revert the title back to their rightful owner. So yeah, these are all things that are happening. Another high profile case that was recently in the news within the past couple of years was that somebody tried to steal Elvis Presley's old home through deed fraud. Through actually that was a confirmed case of them using AI to tell this kind of story, that they were heired the property. Obviously, is a multi-million-dollar home, so that made headlines. So yeah, there's cases. It's on the rise. It's not slowing down. People are finding and using new tools to their advantage, and blockchain emerges as kind of like this truth machine, right? So we're entering an era of disinformation where it's almost impossible to tell what's real or not, if not for the blockchain. The blockchain helps to authenticate information and tell where things originated from, because it has true provenance, and that's really where we think we could help put a stop to these.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing points, and just more proof that we need this desperately. So you grew up in a family full of real estate developers, right? Like you guys actually are real estate developers yourselves, and then you sort of made this leap. You saw that blockchain could solve some of these problems. So tell us, how does your real estate background really inform the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so yes, I come from a real estate development background. My family started here in Hoboken, which is where our office is based out of, back in the early 80s, and started developing real estate here in Jersey City and really throughout the state of New Jersey. And my father had me involved since an early age, getting on construction sites when I was 15, just learning the business, really because I wanted to. I was super interested in real estate always, my entire life, and kind of knew that was my career path. So when I got out of college, he was in and out of retirement at the time. So I eventually took over his book of business and then started my own thing, doing everything from property management, like managing his existing portfolio, to ground up development on my own, all throughout the state of New Jersey. And then in 2017, I learned about blockchain. I had already heard about Bitcoin, but this was the first time that it kind of stuck and resonated with me. And I started investing and just learning about it as kind of a hobby at first. And then the more I learned about the blockchain infrastructure, the more I learned that it could actually be used to solve a lot of the issues that I knew to exist in real estate. That took kind of a unique mind that understanding real estate as well as I did, and also understanding blockchain. It's kind of rare to find someone who's a real estate person who also really gets blockchain. Meanwhile, I have no technical background, just all conceptually, I understood what the problem was and how blockchain could plug a lot of those holes. And back at the time, they did the first real estate fractionalization deal, which means that they, essentially used it as a vehicle to crowdfund. They fractionalized a hotel in Aspen, where they allowed investors to invest any denomination of cash into that building. So I thought that was pretty interesting. A lot of people are boxed out from investing in real estate because it's so capital intensive. This allows someone who has even $1,000 to invest in that asset and get that proportionate share of the net operating income, which was super fascinating. At the time, I spoke to my dad and said, maybe we could look to crowdfund some of our deals. Maybe there's something here, but kind of just check marked that in my head and continued on with life. A few years later, in 2020, I learned what NFTs were, so non-fungible tokens. And the first thought in my head was, First of all, what non-fungible means, if for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, it just means unique. So the non-fungible token, every token is distinct and unique and worth a different amount than the other token, compared to Bitcoin, which is fungible, meaning that every Bitcoin is worth one Bitcoin. So non-fungible describes real estate. Real estate is non-fungible. Every real estate asset is unique based on the different attributes that make it unique. So the location, the zoning, the rent roll, the unit count, the cash flow, all those things make real estate unique. So the proper way to digitize real estate is using a non-fungible token wrapper as opposed to a fungible token like they did for the fractionalization deal back in 2017. Furthermore, the deed to your home is also non-fungible. You don't pass a deed like a bearer asset to pass possession or pass conveyance of your property. Every single deed is a new deed that gets written and signed at the closing table. So I realized that in addition to tokenizing real estate with an NFT wrapper, the deed to your home, which is just a flimsy piece of paper that authenticates ownership of your most valuable asset, should also be tokenized and authenticated on the blockchain. And it should trade on a distributed ledger so that there's full transparency, there's immutability, the conveyance history without needing a third party. And because of that realization, I realized the place to start is with the counties, because they're the ultimate arbiter of these land records. They're the ones who record these records, and getting government on board, especially back in 2020 with blockchain, not an easy task. But at the time, I saw this emergence of RWA tokenization starting to happen, and everyone was focused on securitization, fractionalization, security token marketplaces, etc. And at that moment, I realized I needed to move forward with this vision of digitizing real estate in the correct way, but I also need to get governments on board to do it, because they're the ultimate bridge between the public sector and the private sector, which is the real estate industry, the real estate ecosystem that relies heavily on these records. The title companies, the lenders, the brokers, and even just the individual buyers and sellers. And that was kind of when I made the leap. I sent my dad this whole long-winded email essentially explaining everything I just told you, and his response to me was, son, I think you should stick to your day job. He thought I was crazy at the time, and it took about a year for him to come around. And at the time, the 2021 bull run happened in blockchain and crypto and NFTs, and kind of saw a lot of the things I was talking about come to fruition. And I also knew at the time that the NFT wave would be sort of like a bubble, kind of like the ICO bubble that happened back in 2017. But I knew that the technology that would emerge from it would be technology used to tokenize real world assets. And I knew that that's where the world is going, that everything will be tokenized one day. And so, my dad got to a point where he said, listen, people told me I was crazy when I started investing in Hoboken, because Hoboken wasn't a good area. I just had a vision that close proximity to Manhattan, and people were going to be priced out of Manhattan and need a place to live close by. And I followed through in my vision, and it ended up being correct. And he's like, I may never understand what you're talking about. Clearly you do. Clearly you've made a lot of good points that have proven to be true, and you need to just do this. And this is how you're going to make your biggest contribution to the world. And and so it was a difficult decision, because I had a very kind of sure thing, straight line path to success continuing doing real estate. I took a leap of faith, but it has worked out so far, and it's the most exciting thing I could do, because real estate and crypto or blockchain were both my two biggest passions, and I found a way to merge the two of them. So it's very exciting and fulfilling work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that your dad's on board now. That's so meaningful, both personally and actually. I mean, he really represents a lot of how commercial real estate feels about all of this, right? So if he can come around, then maybe others can as well. I'd love to dig into the other issues that you see blockchain being a solution for. But first, I think a lot of people, especially in the people that live in our space, are very curious about how it's going with Bergen County. So tell us about that partnership, and how it started. Tell us that story, and then kind of bring us to today and where you're currently at with the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bergen County is our first county that we signed. Prior to Bergen County, we were working with a lot of municipalities. We knew that the county was the place to be, but when we first started going, it's kind of in the wake of the FTX collapse, a lot of skepticism amongst governments moving onto the blockchain, and we started where we could. We had relationships with a lot of municipalities throughout the state, and we had a lot of success with those municipalities. And then Bergen County came along. The county clerk there, John Hogan, great guy, super ahead of his time with technology. His office has always been one to modernize quickly. For an example, they pride themselves on being the first county in the state to adopt e-filing before e-file became mandated throughout the state. So John Hogan was on the New Jersey blockchain task force. So that's how I found him and got connected to it. Was I thought that was pretty interesting, that he would probably understand what I'm talking about. So we had several meetings. Took about a year just to get to the point where we could win under contract with them. We had to run a pilot with them, and there's still like there's kind of a dark cloud over the industry at that point, and we just have to kind of prove ourselves that there's no crypto token associated with what we're doing. Cryptocurrency is an application of blockchain, but the values in the blockchain infrastructure. So he's been a great partner. We've been working with them for about a year now. There's a lot of data they have. They're the largest county in the state of New Jersey, and they're a top county in the country. So just ingesting all the data and standardizing it and indexing it properly, which is the biggest task that we're really trying to do, is kind of clean up that mess that exists of documents being all over the place and index them properly per parcel, which helps streamline the process within the title industry. So that's all been going well, and we think we're at a place where the platform will go live to the public at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. So that's the point where we're actually going to unveil what we've been working on to the general public, and we're also working on an exciting pilot that I can't really disclose much information about it. If maybe like in the fall, I'll come back on your podcast again and talk about it when the news actually comes out. But it's a pretty cool concept that involves the county, the title industry, so the title agencies and title research companies, and a very large lender, a very large lending institution that will be running a pilot in Bergen County with the goal of making home buying more affordable, like I spoke about earlier on.
Yay.
And just kind of reducing the cost that's associated with research and settlement, and really just also shortening the gap, shortening the settlement period, which could take a couple months. We could really streamline that process and also shorten the gap period between the settlement and the recording. It's interesting. Most people don't realize that once you close on a property, new ownership or new possession takes place, but the deed might not get recorded for 3 months. So it's hard.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so it's difficult to prove that you're the new owner, because if anyone's looking at the system of record, it's still showing the previous deed, and you don't even know that a transaction has taken place. So yeah, there's this gap period that is something to be settled or solved for.
Wow. Can you, for this audience, which is, it is commercial real estate owners, right? And really, they don't know a lot and often don't know much about crypto as well. Can you explain what a wallet is and how the NFT works within the wallet, and what you're working on could actually just be in their hands in that same day via the wallet? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a wallet is a way to custody a digital asset. And the cool thing about blockchain wallets is that you get a public key and a private key. Explaining what that means is actually pretty important. The public key is a string of numbers and letters that represents to the public that digital wallet, that digital custody that has full transparency, so anybody could see what's in that wallet and that public key, every transaction that public key makes. The private key enables the owner of that wallet to have complete cryptographic control over that wallet. It uses this encryption technology that can't be hacked. There's speculation that quantum computing may be able to hack it in the future. That's something to build towards in the future to make that more foolproof. But right now, the private key is what protects those digital assets that live in that wallet. And the public key is what enables people to see the transactions and the ownership of what exists in that wallet. So one of the cool things that you could do, blockchain allows for anonymity. Even though you have transparency into the wallet, you may not know who's the owner of that public key. So it kind of has this privacy, but also like transparency built into it,
Yes.
which is a cool concept. Within real estate, you need to know who's buying what. So we put it both our like the businesses like the title companies and lenders that we work with, and as well as like the future individuals, the buyers and sellers of real estate, through a KYC KYB process, which is that stands for Know Your Business or Know Your Customer, which essentially authenticates who they are, and we're able to tie that digital identity to that public key address, so that now within our system, you know who actually owns those digital assets. And one of the things that becomes tricky is you can't transfer a deed like another bearer asset, as I mentioned before. Like if I transferred a digital representation of a deed from my wallet to your wallet, that doesn't mean a conveyance has taken place. That doesn't mean that you own the property. But what it does enable us to do is prove that a settlement has taken place. So, imagine when we close on a property and I hand you the key. You have the key now. The deed still hasn't been recorded, proving ownership, but now you have a key that you could actually physically move into your new property. We imagine it being the same way, where there could be some kind of digital representation of a transfer of ownership that doesn't legally show that ownership until the deed gets recorded, but at least proves that there's been a transfer at the settlement table, and helps to like validate things that happen within that gap period between the settlement and the closing. And so we envision a world where people actually have ownership of their keys, of their assets, where they have like this digital place where they could go to manage all their properties, have all the public information, tell where all the information is coming from, because blockchain enables provenance. So a lien gets recorded, you could actually tell it was recorded by the county clerk's wallet. And a title search gets performed, you can actually tell it was done by the title research company's wallet. So it just enables more transparency into this like opaque industry, which is pretty cool. And I think like that's kind of the way the world is moving. With like this, with the rise in stable tokens, people want to custody their own cash. They don't want to keep it under their pillow. So you could hold as much cash as you want in a digital wallet. You have that encryption technology that protects your possession of it, and yeah. So I think the nuance though is that we're going to move to a world where people don't necessarily realize they're using blockchain. Like that's the key, is to kind of abstract away all the technical part of it, and like the blockchain explorer, which people don't understand what they're looking at, and just provide them with like a really easy user experience that just makes it easier for them to transfer money around, hold possession of their assets, keep everything in one place.
And people are working on that right now. When do you think we're going to see the day where us blockchain people don't have to talk about blockchain anymore?
It's definitely going to take some time, but it's happening right now.
Yeah.
I think that we're entering a new era within blockchain where, there was kind of this big, for the last 10 years, it's been all about tokens. Like, it started out with Bitcoin. And now that, there's all these altcoins. This last cycle had kind of like a big meme coin run, which kind of tells me that we're at the end of this like whole token play, and we're entering an era of blockchain infrastructure, which is kind of what we're focused on. And I equate it kind of to like the .com era, where like all these .com domains started going up in crazy value, and then all of that crashed. But what emerged out of that crash, not like the internet crashed. The internet still what it is today, and you have the Amazons and the Metas and Googles all emerge. That's kind of where I see the blockchain industry today, is like, there's going to be tokens that have real utility and real use case. A lot of the BS ones will kind of fade away and fizzle away to nothing. And the pure blockchain infrastructure plays will creep into every single industry, rewrite how everything is handled. Things will move over blockchain rails, and it'll happen in a way that people don't necessarily understand the inner workings of blockchain, just like how we don't understand the inner workings of the internet, to like the layman people at least, and they're just going to use it like it's second nature.
Yep. I'm very excited for that. So back to like the county and working with counties, what is the plan and strategy for you guys as you roll out more counties? Is that the strategy, or is it something different than that?
That's part of the strategy. I mean, I mentioned earlier, kind of like the 4 pillars of what we're looking to solve, and every county cares about something, different. Some counties really care about deed fraud. Some counties don't really care as much and don't think it's their responsibility. But as we look to scale, right now we have over 10 counties and growing pretty rapidly. But as we look to scale, we're starting to look at some kind of top-down, solutions where we work with the state government, and then they help to push us in to all the counties within that state. To get all 3,100 counties on board just from calling, that many counties throughout the country. Of course, there is kind of like a snowball effect. One county hears about it, they love it, and they tell the next county. Like Bergen County has been an advocate for us in New Jersey. We have a lot of counties in Kentucky right now. And then being involved with the industry associations that exist, that govern land records, that govern the mortgage industry, those help us scale. And then, I would say that the key thing is like we're looking to just integrate everything into our system. We're not looking to disintermediate or replace land record management systems. So there's certain land record management systems that have strongholds in certain states. One state that we just entered into, North Dakota, they have one land record management system for the entire state. There's a couple other states that have two. There's a couple national ones that have the lion's share of the entire country. And once we integrate with one of these systems, we could replicate that throughout other counties, and we could use them to channel sell through, and add an additional. It helps get the land record management companies get more business, because now they could add this additional infrastructure that helps harden and protect their records for like a small extra cost. And now we're able to scale quickly just by partnering with the 10 largest land record management systems, as opposed to calling 3,100 counties. And so that's the goal, is to become ubiquitous. We think that the industry is changing very rapidly. We think that the foundation and just the fundamental way in which real estate operates, and the way that people do due diligence on properties, and the way that the title research industry operates and exists is all going to change, and we're going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as far as a timeline, do you have a real specific one that you're kind of tracking, or you're just pretty organic about that, just when they get on board kind of thing?
I would say it's a mix of both. Like, obviously we have KPIs that we strive to hit. We're looking to, be at between 35 and 50 counties by the end of the year, which is an aggressive goal, but I think we're going to get there. So
nice.
Yeah. So, obviously it's as it happens, but we increased our sales force. We've increased our marketing. We've, gotten very deeply embedded into some of the organizations that I'm talking about. And and then, we're also speaking to some state and federal agencies as well for kind of a top-down approach to move quickly. So awesome. Things are gonna start accelerating a lot faster in the next 12 to 24 months, I would say.
So really quick on the tech piece, blockchain has been around for a while. We've been tracking it. Since 2017, you've really known about this. AI sprouted up 3 years ago and changed everything. How are you guys using AI in your processes?
A lot of different ways. I think, one of the important ways is for indexing. A lot of the indexing that we're doing right now would have been impossible only 3 years ago. So AI has really increased that kind of workflow of, matching different records to different properties. I should also explain really quickly what I mean by like the county being in disarray, or all the documents being everywhere, is that, one would assume that if you go to 123 Main Street, you would just see every deed and mortgage in chronological order, the entire conveyance history, just indexed per parcel. That's not how it works. When a deed gets recorded, it goes into a new deed book, and then the next deed that gets recorded for a new document goes onto the next page. So you just have all these deed books and mortgage books that exist that aren't indexed anywhere. And that's the reason the title industry exists, is to make sense of that mess.
Yeah.
So with AI, we're able to streamline that process of indexing. And we're also able to allow for people to make sense and create like intelligence around the data that we have. Because we're going to have, very authentic data source straight from the county and straight from the government directly.
Yeah.
and there's a lot of information. We have a lot of zoning information, for example, and you may want to know without reading a 50-page document what you could build on your property. So now you could just go into our chatbot and say, hey, what could I build here? Or do I have any are there any deed restrictions? I'm trying to buy this property. Are there any deed restrictions in there? And so we see us having this like proprietary data set that AI enables an intelligence layer on top of.
Nice. It's amazing. I'm so excited.
And by the way, like I said, I have no technical background, but now I'm coding. I'm building full applications just from prompting AI to
Wow.
do what I want. And I'm not pushing the code, but I'm giving it to my engineers so that they could actually build it, and I could, relate the vision I have in my head to them in a way that they could actually visualize and see. So it's awesome
Yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah, and that way I never thought about it from that perspective, like just using it as a communication tool as for the language, right? Because you're using English and then it's translating it into code that the engineer can then read and understand.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like we speak different languages. I have all these ideas in my head. Sometimes it's hard to paint a picture to them because I don't speak like tech, and so now I could just build an application, say this is what I mean, this is what it looks like, and
Yeah.
take a look at the code base and can we actually build this?
It's awesome. Dan, you're really a visionary. You
Thank
really
you.
are. Yeah. And
I
thank you for
appreciate it.
sticking it out, I mean, a lot of people like the FTX crash, everything, it's easy to bail. And I'm grateful that you haven't because it's going to change a lot of things. So, a couple more questions. Can you really dig into how this makes housing more affordable?
Yeah, so I think it's like it makes the fees around purchasing homes more affordable. So it doesn't necessarily like bring down the actual home cost, but the fees associated with buying a home it should bring down. And what I mean by that is, you're spending a lot of money to do title research. The reason the title research industry exists is, like I said, to make a mess of that data.
Yeah.
Once we cleanse that data, and then going forward, as we're putting information on chain at the source, and that source has a timestamp and a date and you actually validate it directly, the title research process becomes a lot more condensed. And so we're able to, something that may take a couple weeks could maybe take a couple hours or a couple minutes even. So we're able to compress that process and reduce costs there. And then title insurance premiums, they've historically only gone up, which, they may continue for the foreseeable future, but eventually if we're going to get to a point where this chain of title becomes a lot more deterministic as we're putting it on chain, and it weeds out a lot of the anomalies and risks that the insurance companies are insuring against. And theoretically, because of that, title insurance premium should come down over time. I don't think we're going to like replace title insurance. Definitely not. We still need the industry behind us to make sense of everything that's happened in the past, and we need professionals to know what they're looking at. And there's always going to be risk, even if we copy everything from the land record management system onto the blockchain. That doesn't just fix mistakes that may exist there. So it's always going to be needed, but as there's less risk, theoretically the cost to insure that risk should come down as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it might be a part of your answer for this, but 10 years from now, what will you be the most proud of accomplishing?
Yeah, it is part of everything I just said. I mean, obviously, I'm very ambitious. I have very ambitious goals. So I think if I accomplish, 50% of what I'm talking about in 10 years, I'll be extremely proud of what I did. The reason I did this is because of I want to realize the vision that I have. If it was about money or anything like that, I would have just stayed in real estate and continued just investing in crypto on the side.
Sure.
But I just want to make an impact on the world. So I think at that point in 10 years, we'll probably be ubiquitous, at least in the United States. We'll have fundamentally changed the way fee simple real estate transacts, both on like the settlement side, on the recording side, and on the title research side. And to be able to like be the driving force behind that is something to be extremely proud of. So that's it. I think I'm in it for the long haul. I'm not, like you said, I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm not gonna. There's been plenty of times, even today in crypto, the market's down a lot, and I'm in it for the long haul. I do have like a real estate kind of mindset. People in real estate tend to have long-term horizons because, you don't like flip a property because the price doubles overnight. You can keep track of that. You're just investing in the long term. And that's how I see this is just, I'm in it for the long haul. I want to change the world and I want to see my vision through.
Yeah. Well, I agree, and I'm the same. So, well, I think that we've learned quite a bit from you today, and I'm really grateful that you joined me here on the podcast as my first guest. Really appreciate that, Dan, and definitely will have you back in the fall once your big news breaks. Really excited to see what that is, and just thanks a lot for being here today.
Of course, this was fun. Thanks for having me. And yeah, happy to be the first guest. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
You too. Wish you all the best.